NASCAR just nuked Hendrick Motorsports with penalties. The largest single fine they've ever issued a team, hundreds of points. The entire complexion of this season has changed. How's it going, y'all? My name is Eric. Welcome to a midweek episode of Out of the Groove. Breaking news this morning, NASCAR has dropped the hammer. An absolute bomb. They have unleashed hell on Hendrick Motorsports. Before qualifying at Phoenix this past weekend, the hood louvers on all four Hendrick Motorsports Chevys, as well as one Cred racing car driven by Justin Haley, were confiscated by NASCAR and taken to their research and development center in Concord, North Carolina for further evaluation. Today, NASCAR penalized both Hendrick Motorsports and Cred Racing for modifying a single-source next-gen car part. The number 5, 9, 24, and 48 teams were each docked 100 owner points. Alex Bowman, Kyle Larson, and William Byron were also docked 100 driver points. Chase Elliott, because he did not race this last weekend, avoids the driver penalty. Each car was also docked 10 playoff points each. All four crew chiefs, that's Cliff Daniels, Alan Gustafson, Rudy Fugle, Blake Harris, have been suspended for the next 4 races. And each team was fined $100,000. Combined, that's a $400,000 penalty for Hendrick Motorsports, the largest single fine issued to a team in NASCAR history. Blame inflation if you want, I don't know. Justin Haley's number 31 Cred racing team was hit with the exact same penalty. 100 driver, 100 owner points, 10 playoff points. His crew chief is gone for 4 races and the team was fined $100,000 as well. Like I said, these penalties completely flipped this season upside down. Alex Bowman was enjoying a nice little points lead after Phoenix, the first time he's ever led the NASCAR Cup Series standings since he joined the series. Thanks to this penalty, Alex Bowman goes from first to, I believe, 23rd. 23rd! He is now well outside the top 16 in points. It's still early, but William Byron drops from 4th in the regular season standings to, by my calculations, 29th. Kyle Larson will go from 5th to outside the top 33rd. Chase Elliott did not lose any driver points, but the number 9 team will drop from 17th to, I think, like 40th in owners points, which is what pays the best for the team at the end of the season. And Justin Haley, oh, God bless Justin Haley. He is now credited with negative 40 points on the season. That's just stinks. That's just sad. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I have more points than Justin. You have more points than Justin Haley. That's, wow. I'm just shaking my head because the effects don't just stop there. You know, William Byron has won the last 2 races. That's 10 playoff points. Bye-bye. Just evaporated before his very eyes. He still has 3 playoff points to his credit because he's won some stages, but he lost effectively the 10 playoff points he earned for winning the last 2 weeks. Now, he's still virtually, automatically qualified for the playoffs, but he does not get the playoff points, and that's an effect he's going to feel throughout every round of the playoffs in the fall. This penalty flips the season upside down right now here, just 4 or 5 weeks in, but these effects will still be felt in 30 weeks once we get close to the championship in October, November. I'm going to continue to talk about. This is huge. Also a reminder, the top 10 in points at the end of the regular season earn valuable playoff points. And Alex Bowman, again, from 1st to 23rd. If the regular season had ended yesterday, that would be 15 playoff points to Bowman's credit. That would be huge. That would be a game changer. Those have all disappeared, at least for the time being. And I'll just be honest, there's no way Alex Bowman gets back to the points lead. He's not making up those 100 points this regular season. It's not going to happen. He might get back into the top 10. He's not going to get back to the points lead. His chances of winning the regular season championship, any Hendrick car's chances of winning the regular season championship, are now effectively over. And again, losing 10 playoff points throughout every round of the playoffs. The regular season has been affected, but the playoffs, I mean, Hendrick, they seem to have the best cars to start this year. No real question about it. We'll talk about in a moment, but I don't think this penalty is necessarily going to affect their performance too much, but they are now in such deep points holes. All the success they've had to start this year has been wiped out, and then some. This completely changes the complexion of this season. Hendrick Motorsports has the right to appeal. As of the time I'm recording this, they have not yet informed the public of their intentions. But if Hendrick Motorsports does choose to appeal, I don't think they'll be successful. RFK, Front Row Motorsports, and Stewart-Haas Racing were all hit with effectively the exact same penalty last year, and in all three cases, the penalty stuck. I think even in like the case of SHR, they initially filed an appeal, and then I think they eventually rescinded it because they knew it wasn't going anywhere. So should Hendrick appeal, which, it might be worth it just to try, because God, $400,000, 400 total regular season points, like maybe it's worth at least submitting the paperwork and paying the little fee. But even if Hendrick appeals, I think there's almost no chance this penalty gets rescinded in any way. The rule is pretty cut and dry. Do not modify a single source part. NASCAR VP of Competition Elton Sawyer said this morning on SiriusXM NASCAR Radio. Quote, "It was obvious to us that these parts had been modified in an area that hasn't been approved." It was obvious. So Hendrick Motorsports, even should they appeal to maybe delay the crew chief suspensions a couple weeks, I don't think they win their appeal. These 100-point, 10 playoff point, $100,000 fine suspension, they're going to stand. Just when the crew chief serve that penalty, serve those suspensions, that might change slightly. NASCAR has not yet offered any specifics into what exactly Hendrick and Colleague did to the hood louvers that would result in such a penalty. Like, obviously they modified them, they did something to them. What specifically, we don't know. NASCAR has not typically been super transparent with these penalties the past year. I would like to know more of exactly what they did, but we likely will never get that information. But Elton Sawyer said it was obvious that these parts were modified illegally, and that's a big no-no. The hood louvers are a key component of the race car. In years past, the Gen 6 and before, teams would put pieces of tape, in front of the grille openings to affect performance, affect downforce, affect airflow. Those pieces of tape were used to adjust on the car during a race. Now, with the next gen, you can't do that anymore. You can't go put tape on the front grille openings. That's a big no-no. That's a black and white rule. The hood louvers are openings or vents in the hood that serve as a release point for ducts that transfer air out from the radiator. I read that sentence word for word off NASCAR.com, so hopefully I would sound like I know what I'm talking about. What I do know for sure, though, is that if you mess with the hood louvers with these vents, it could potentially give you an aero advantage. In this case, was there a performance advantage? Again, we don't really know. I mean, NASCAR did confiscate these hood louvers before qualifying. Hendrick still went out and won the pole and eventually won the race. So I think it's safe to say these cars were fast even without them. Jeff Gordon said after the race, quote, "These guys have speed in the car. There was nothing, not last week," referring to Las Vegas, "not this week, that was getting them to victory lane other than a lot of hard work and great teamwork." He's probably right, but I guess we'll see. The next time NASCAR races at a more aero-dependent track, I know they're racing at Atlanta this weekend, but that's more of a super speedway. If they go to another intermediate here in a few weeks, I'll be curious to see if the Hendrick Motorsports cars are still by far the fastest in the field. We'll have to wait and see. I doubt the hood louvers made that big of a difference, but who knows? Who knows what Chad Knaus is cooking over there? This penalty does not surprise me. Again, it's consistent with penalties NASCAR handed out last year to teams like Roush, Front Row, Stewart-Haas. You modify a single source part, it's a 100-point penalty, 4-race suspension, $100,000 fine, etc., etc. I thought the only thing that might be in Hendrick's favor in this case is the fact that the parts were confiscated before the race, before qualifying. But then I remember that I think RFK last year early when they got hit with the similar penalty, I think their part was confiscated before the race as well, and they still got hit with a 100-point penalty. So I guess that never was going to matter. I mean, you look at the rule book, there's nothing in the rule book that says, oh, if it's found before the race, you get off free. No, it doesn't matter when NASCAR officials find the issue during the weekend. If they find something illegal or illegally modified on your car, penalty. So I don't think there's a lot else to say. I think NASCAR was consistent. They followed their rule book. It's a very black and white ruling, and I think they made the appropriate call. NASCAR updated their rulebook before last season to include much harsher penalties. The goal of the next gen is to even the playing field. It's to bring teams like Front Row Motorsports closer to Team Penske's competition level. And the number one way that's been achieved has been by making the cars spec. Everyone from Rick Ware to Rick Hendrick has the same chassis. The engines from team to manufacturer are still different. Obviously, the engineers, the sim data, the resources behind the scenes are different depending on what kind of organization you're in. But many of the key nuts and bolts, parts and pieces are the same from one team to the next. NASCAR is all about cutting costs. They don't want these teams trying to outspend each other, spending ridiculous amounts of money on the littlest of things. The big teams will always have millions more to spend on this much of an advantage that the small teams won't. NASCAR's goal by introducing a spec car and by enforcing these rules strictly is to cut down on any gray area bendings of the rules. Behind the scenes, cost and cost cutting is a huge debate, is a huge discussion. As money has become tighter, many aspects of the industry have become more efficient, a little thinner, a little leaner, a little more streamlined. And now in some cases, that cost cutting behind the scenes has begun to affect the on-track product. I think at least a handful of years from now, we'll be able to talk about whether the next gen has had a positive or more negative impact on the sport. But for the time being, if the next gen is to realize its goal of making more NASCAR Cup Series teams competitive, NASCAR has to officiate strictly. You can't think outside the box. You can't work outside or in that gray area too much. These cars have to be equal. And if you do something to one of these equal parts to give yourself an unfair advantage, they're going to drop the hammer. They've made that abundantly clear in the past year. Hendrick Motorsports flew too close to the sun and they got burned. As far as I can tell, this was a justified penalty, consistent with NASCAR's previous rulings. It hurts Hendrick Motorsports. It completely changes the outlook of this early portion of the season. It really changes the entire season, like I said, but I don't think it was the wrong call. It's just unfortunate that, these teams continue to play like it's 2003 when the new culture says you just can't do that anymore. I think it was Brad Keselowski, after RFK got hit with the same huge penalty last year, that basically came out and said, we had a talk at the shop. You're not going to play in those gray areas anymore. You're not going to bend the rules. We have to do everything by the book, to the T. Our company cannot afford another 100-point penalty or massive fine. And we'll have to see if time goes on, if the big teams start to follow a similar philosophy, like a change of culture. I mean, that's what the next gen car is. Not everyone likes it. In some ways it's good, in some ways it is bad. But them's the rules, and Hendrick Motorsports and Colleague, apparently, broke them. So leave your thoughts down in the comment section below. Huge. I'm not surprised. I expected a penalty, but just, seeing these numbers on paper, blow my mind. This wasn't the only penalty announced today, but I'm going to talk about the Denny Hamlin penalty in a separate episode later on. I will see you guys then. If you enjoyed this video, please leave it a like. I greatly appreciate your support. If you're new to the channel and you love NASCAR and you want to keep up to date on all the latest NASCAR news, hit that subscribe button. And thank you to my Patreon supporters for your continued and very generous support. Again, I will see you later today. We've got some other news to react to, and Denny Hamlin, of course, also hit with a massive penalty. I'll give you guys my thoughts on that. But that's going to do it for this episode. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.